Here at the Lunaticks and episode 1, Smart Cities and Smart People, how do we make it all happen? So I'd really like to welcome another guest here to talk about the processes of a local council trying to deal with the challenges of moving a city into that space that we call Smart Cities. So Tom Boyle is the Digital Economy Strategy Project Officer at Lake Macquarie City Council. Now, Tom, I'm going to ask you, you say the title. Just you speak your title to me.
My actual title?
Yeah, your actual title.
I'm actually a strategic land use planner at Lake Macquarie City Council.
Right. So was there discussion around the title? I'm sorry, it's just a thing I have.
Actually, it's a funny story, Greg, because I actually imposed that title on myself. So I had a lot of questions from people as I was going around talking about the work that we're doing around the digital economy. And people were saying, who do I contact? So I sought permission from our management, and I said, look, I want to give myself this title so people know who to talk to at council.
So in my previous misspent time, I was a young journalist, and I worked as a cadet, and I worked for the Australian newspaper in Sydney. And at one stage, I landed the evening shift, and we had a chief of staff. Now, most big metropolitan newspapers have a night chief of staff. Well, I was the night chief of staff, and the joke was I was the chief to myself. Now, mind you, I had all the other various people like Piers Ackerman who were hounding me about various other things, but are you a bit of a chief to yourself on this one, mate?
Oh, certainly.
Oh, really? So you don't know all those stakeholders? You can just go out there and wreak havoc and sort of, hey, here it is, smart technology, come on.
No, that was a joke, Greg.
Right.
So certainly this has been an immensely collaborative exercise, what Lake Macquarie City Council has been doing. We started early this year. We got word that the National Broadband Network was going to be rolled out in the LGA, in the local government area. And just to put that in perspective, Lake Macquarie Council, so we've got a population of around 200,000, so we are substantially larger than Newcastle. We cover quite a larger geographical area. Now the rollout of the NBN was going to, around about 75% of households would benefit, and that was quite a good thing for us because back in the 2011 ABS census, about 1 in 5 households had trouble accessing the internet or didn't have a connection.
At all?
At all.
Right.
So even though it might not be the NBN that some people want, it's still a big improvement on what is the current situation.
Situation where people actually had nothing at all till... So at this stage now, the NBN going out, they've actually gone down my street, laid all the cable, it's fantastic. They relayed all the paving, it's really made a huge difference. But technically speaking, at actually flipping the switch, when's that happening?
Oh, that's one for the boss upstairs, I think.
Right.
So we, I guess our role in the NBN rollout, the NBN was really a catalyst for our council to, I guess, look at how we could capitalise on high-speed broadband more broadly, and also look at other technologies that are coming online, and really whether our community was ready to benefit, I guess, or be able to capitalise on this infrastructure that was going in. So, as I said, we started a conversation with the community earlier this year. We set about developing a strategy, but really we had no sort of concept of what that strategy might look like. So we went out to the community and we said, how can we use new digital technologies to make Lake Macquarie even better? How can we use new technologies to make a more connected, sustainable, prosperous, innovative city? And really we just put that question out there, and through a series of workshops and conversations, presentations, we were able to, I guess, fill in the knowledge gaps that we ourselves didn't really have at council. Having said that, we were actually doing a lot of good things, and this process revealed those good things that council was doing already.
Yes. And
we were able to connect the dots between what different departments are doing. So it's been a real learning curve in that way as well.
Okay, so just going back, I know one of the biggest challenges for any government, no matter what the stratum, is actually engaging the public. So what steps did you take? You talked about some workshops and get together, but there were some other more concrete things happening as well, and I think there was some very interesting suggestions coming out of that process. You know what, tease that a bit out?
Yeah, certainly. So we had a lot of great positive feedback as part of this engagement process, which is somewhat refreshing. Working in local government, often people want to have a go at you, but I think just because the way we framed it, and the topic was so sort of optimistic, a lot of people were really interested in having a say. To help people come to the table, we actually ran a competition where people could win an Apple Watch. Mm-hmm. And that was quite well received, and we were particularly interested in targeting the younger demographic as well, because often when it comes to council engagement, they're not particularly keen.
Okay.
It's usually the older demographics.
Sure. By the way, which watch? Which one?
Which one? It was the Sport, I think.
The Sport.
Yeah, if you must know. Yeah.
Well, I guess it probably suits like Macquarie, because it's very much comes across as a very sporty, active, outdoorsy type of place.
Yeah, and well, just on that, that's one of the, I guess, the pieces of feedback that we had from the community was, people move to this area because of the lifestyle. Mm. We have a lake that's, twice the size of Sydney Harbour, and it's just a beautiful area. You've got cycleways, got the Fernley track. You're so close to Sydney, and then you're near Newcastle as well. And it's an affordable lifestyle as well. So we've got all these strengths that the city has and that people, enjoy about the city. And so it was, thinking about how new digital technologies could play to those strengths in many ways.
Okay. So there's lots of positives. That was obviously affirming, put a smile on a few faces of folk and council, both councillors as well. What were the drawbacks? What were the areas that you realised we really need to lift our game in here, or people were saying, well, we weren't even aware of that? What areas were they?
Probably one that comes to mind is this issue of open data. So I think, being a big organisation, we do sit on a lot of data. Some of that data is obviously protected in commercial and confidence for obvious reasons, but a lot of that can be released out into the community if it's packaged in such a way that can benefit the community. Yes. So the classic example I like to use is the location of disabled toilets. Yeah. So there's actually a national program to try and get that data out there. But if we as a council can provide that sort of data online, not only on our own website, but actually in a format that third-party apps can link into via an API, that then provides multiple avenues for that information to get out to the community. Yes. And it's a really sort of cost-effective way of doing that.
Mm. Now, the one other thing is that part of developing a strategy was going about it and then getting that embraced and taken. How has that process been? Or are we still talking very early days?
Well, it's actually on exhibition at the moment, so this is what it looks like. I don't know if you can see
shine nice and colourful, white background.
There's a few copies lying around, and you can also view it online. Not only as obviously it's very ironic that we're talking about a digital economy strategy and we've got paper hard copy here, but you can see it online at haveyoursayLakeMac.com.au. Okay. And we've also got an interactive version online as well that people can have a look at and comment on. So it's on exhibition until tomorrow, but anyone, if they want to give me a call and have a chat about it, certainly happy to talk about it until the end of the month, if not longer.
Okay, so I guess there's the $60 million gorilla that's sitting in the room, and that's the merger of councils.
I was wondering when you might ask that question.
It's our responsibility. It was interesting. You talk about data. Data, some of it obviously has to be held in confidence and etc. Though sometimes it's not apparent why it should be held. I have to say that. However, where does all this work, effort, energy, resources go if the merger, whoever succumbs first, whoever blinks first, happens? Is there a strategy here about, this is an invaluable resource, lots of intel, what do we do with it all?
I think it's a really good question, and it's one that's been on our minds obviously recently with the conversations going on. But I think the important thing is that irrespective of what happens, and we're just in the dark as everyone else in this room about this, pending a state government decision. Yes. But irrespective of what happens, I think all these conversations about embracing new digital technologies, about helping vulnerable people within the community become more digitally literate and including them, and about fostering innovation investment in the startup sector. All of these things are still relevant no matter what happens. Yeah. And I think that one thing to note is probably that Lake Macquarie does have some unique characteristics relative to Newcastle, in that we are 9 town centres distributed around quite a large area, as opposed to sort of a more urban area that is Newcastle.
Centralised, or yeah, and certainly in terms of access, the lake presents you with some really big challenges. I mean, culturally as well, because out of that space was old coal mining communities and very isolated, and they kind of like to keep to themselves. Because that was one of the conversations I was having when I went along to the startup. I think it's where I first met you, was early, yeah. And people were just saying, well, no, that's okay on this side of the lake, but it doesn't work for us on the other side of the lake, type of thing, you know, and that conversation.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. I think when we talk about Lake Macquarie, there's often distinct identities with the western side, the eastern side, the north, even within our individual town centres as well. And I think that that's not a bad thing. It's great that these places have their strong individual identities, but at the same time, there is, I guess, a kind of need to be connecting those communities in new ways to overcome that physical geography barrier. And certainly from council's perspective, new technologies are making the scale of our operations more efficient as well.
Now, I know you're an evangelist for this to some extent, but what about in terms of the demographic? Lake Macquarie certainly has, post, I guess, the baby boom that did happen is coming through, but it does have an older demographic. And not to say that because you're old, you're not necessarily going to embrace technology. I'm 50, you know, and I'm sort of living with it and working with it. But is there a level of resistance? Is that part of your strategy to overcome that resistance, or what's happening there?
Yeah, look, in our conversations that we've been having with the community, I've been really surprised about the, enthusiasm from the older demographics to embrace this sort of stuff. So Lake Macquarie actually runs a series of seniors living programs within our libraries called Tech Talks. Yep. Things like social media, how to use Facebook, how to use internet banking. And that program has been going for a little while now, and it's been remarkably successful. And as part of, going around and talking to people about the strategy, we've been having sort of one-on-one chats with people about using these services, and they love it. And they love what the libraries provide as well in terms of the facilities, internet access. I remember having a conversation with one of the librarians, and she was saying that our computers are in such high demand that we have to take bookings, and that people come in to do their tax, to fill out employment forms, everything that they can't do, outside if they don't have access. And a lot of these people are older. So I think it's maybe a bit of a stereotype that when you think that older people aren't engaging, I think that's definitely not the case in Lake Macquarie.
Right. Okay. So in terms of the timescale, this is going to go close off tomorrow, you were saying, in terms of feedback. What happens? Where does it go from there?
So just to reiterate, I guess we're happy to extend that period for anyone who wants to have a look at the strategy, and I encourage you to do so. It has been, a long process of community consultation, but we're still always keen to hear what people have to say. I guess the process doesn't actually stop once we take it off exhibition. But in terms of formalities, what will happen is we'll collate all the feedback that we've received, and then we'll report that to council, and then they'll consider whether to adopt the strategy as formal council policy.
As recommendations. So when do you have to have all that done and dusted, ready for the council to consider?
So the next council sitting is in February next year. Okay. And how's that going? I know, speaking as a former journo, deadlines was my terror. How are you with your deadline? Oh, look, I've got all of Christmas to work on. So.
Surely, I mean, wouldn't you be on the boat, on the lake? Come on.
I wish.
So how are we going for time, folks? Are we good? Still got a little bit more? Okay, 2 more. Now, how did you get to this job? I mean, because you had quite an interesting pathway to this position, I recall.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to know, I'm actually a Lake Macquarie boy. I grew up in near Valentine, and so I have a sort of a strong affinity for the area. And then I sort of moved into Newcastle, studied at Newcastle, and then moved out to Sydney. And I worked for about 4 years with the University of Technology at the Institute for Sustainable Futures. And there we dabbled on a lot of sort of water and energy efficiency projects. And one of the key projects I worked on for a while was looking at user interfaces for websites, how to get people to reduce their energy and water consumption. So that sort of had parallels to what was going on, the conversations that were going on. I started a few years back at Lake Macquarie.
Okay.
And the management came to our department and said, you guys are good at dealing with long-term things and also short-term implications. So, Tom, you know a bit about this stuff, so how about you get on it?
Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap it up here, but thank you very much, Tom.
No worries.
Really
Thank
appreciate
you,
it. And I think we'll work on a title that's a little bit more pithy. So thanks very much, Tom. Appreciate it. So at this stage, we just need to do a little wind-up and a bit of a thank you to all the good folk who've been working really hard. At this stage, the volunteers and the committee of the Lunatics of Newcastle, they've been doing a tremendous job. They have put on lots of stuff during this year, but also in the previous year. And I think also we're looking forward to some feedback as to whether doing this live TV with Hunter TV here at the Foghorn, the Brewhouse, is a thing we want to venture with into 2016. What do you think, Lisa?
Absolutely. And we also want to thank the audience tonight, right?
Well, without the audience, we're just like a bell clanging in an echo chamber. So a round of applause for you folks. And they've been so polite and quiet. I haven't heard a peep from them. Even though I can hear a bit of slurping of the beers, but anyway.
We needed a few more rounds, maybe.
That's right. So big shout out from the audience, please, folks. You know, a bit of, rubble rousing. We love Newcastle. We love the Lunatics. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Oh, okay. I think we'll work on that for 2016. Get those lungs moving, boys and girls. Okay. So at this stage, look, thank you very much. We're going to go countdown here. Appreciate it. Here at the Foghorn, the Brewhouse, thank you very much for our first episode of Lunatics
Live.
Live. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
And good night.